Hey folks, it's Daryl here, letting you know that we have a great show for you today. Of course, we have the 10 biggest feuds in football history, inspired by the Neymar and Cavani feud that seems to be happening right now with that free kick and that penalty. But I'm here to let you know that after today's show, after the music, right at the end, you're going to get a message from me that's basically political. It's some legislation that affects me directly, and I would never normally talk about it on the show, except it's a direct threat to me, and I want to do everything possible to try and stop it happening. You probably guessed what it is already. Maybe you haven't, but please be forewarned. If you want to hear it, it's after the outro music. If you don't want to hear it, just hit stop there and then. Okay, thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy today's show. Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove, and I'm joined by a man with whom I hope I never have a long-running feud. His name is Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello. I guess, don't snub a handshake and we'll see what happens.
Imagine if we did have a feud. We'd have to really rethink the Total Soccer Show.
Very awkward.
If I'm not talking to him.
Not you and me, but it's happened before. It was like Mike and the Mad Dog, I think, is like the famous New York sports radio duo that split up and have not yet reunited, but they were together for like 20 years.
So
and
did
then
they
just hated each
go
other.
And do separate radio shows?
I believe they did, yes.
That's never as good, right?
And neither one is as good, yes.
Oh, God. I hope this isn't sort of a terribly ironic audio clip 5 years from now. Right, I'm knocking on wood too. So we are, of course, here today to talk about football feuds. This idea inspired by Messrs. Neymar Jr. and Edson Cavani.
Correct.
Would you like to give the background, Taylor, before we get into our current feuds?
Yeah, it was basically just this past weekend. PSG beating Lyon, I believe it was, 2-0, but that really wasn't the storyline. The storyline was more so that Neymar and Cavani and Dani Alves to some extent were a little caught a couple times arguing over who got to take a free kick, who got to take a penalty.
Yep.
It was pretty obvious that both Neymar and Cavani wanted to take both the free kick and the penalty, and there was a lot of ill words exchanged.
And then
it came out. Which thing are you going to point out?
Well, that Neymar unfollowed Cavani on Instagram, which is the most petty 21st century thing I've ever heard of between teammates.
Hey man, it's how people indicate that they want a transfer move as well. So you never know. But I was going to say, and then it came out that Cavani has a clause in his contract that he gets a €1 million bonus if he's the top scorer. I'm guessing Neymar has the same provision, only probably much higher.
But they're both super wealthy already.
Yeah.
What do they do with €1 million?
Competition plus money equals feud.
Oh.
Yeah.
So inspired by the Neymar Cavani feud, which we don't know where it's going to go yet, right?
I'm sure it will end up with people saying, oh, it was overblown and it wasn't a big deal, even though I'm guessing they don't speak to each other in the locker room right now.
We're going to do our top 10. We've essentially done 5 each.
Sure.
There may be some overlap. Top 10 feuds in football. And I'm hoping you've done the same thing as me. This isn't going to be like Celtic, Rangers, Barcelona, Real Madrid. Those are like soccer team rivalries. This is like when it got personal between one person and another.
Yep.
Sometimes with the Dani Alves involved facilitating on one side or the other.
Sure. I mean, then in that case, you ready for me to kick it off?
Let's go. Let's go with your first one.
I mean, I'm going to start off, if you want to go personal, involving another person, I'm going to go Mauro Icardi and Maxi Lopez.
Oh, great. Okay,
the only rivalry, individual player rivalry I know of that spawned a derby, it's called the Wanda Derby, because Maxi Lopez was married to Wanda Nara. Then it came out, I believe publicly, that Mauro Icardi had been having an affair while the two were teammates.
What team?
I believe it was Inter Milan. They were both still playing there. Maxi Lopez had 3 kids with Wanda Nara. You know how I know that? Because those 3 children are now tattooed on Mauro Icardi. Yes. It did not go well. They do not enjoy each other. So yeah, when Sampdoria, which is where Maxi Lopez ended up played Inter Milan, that match was called the Wanda Derby.
It still is? Or
I think while the two of them were there, maybe it still is. I'm not sure. But either way, and then Icardi was posting photos of him with Lopez's kids. There's a very famous photo of Icardi when he was 13 getting Maxi Lopez's autograph when Lopez was a professional with Barcelona. So it's a lot of crossover and a reminder that photos taken in the digital age tend to stick around and be used ironically later on.
Wow, that's a strong start out of the gate. I guess we're not doing countdown 10 to 1, right? No. Feuds are just feuds. They're just bad.
It was mostly just you gave me the segue with sometimes involving a third party. And it was that one involved a third party.
Well, how about one that doesn't?
Sure.
How about Ruud Gullit and Alan Shearer.
Okay.
This was in the early 2000s, it might be late 90s actually, 99, 2000 in England. Alan Shearer is and was, but very much at the time was, a Newcastle legend. Newcastle's number 9 goal scorer. Ruud Gullit takes over as coach and basically just does not get along with Alan Shearer, doesn't really rate him as a player. Ruud Gullit is all about, in his words, sexy football. I'm going to make Newcastle play some sexy football. And he didn't see Shearer as part of that. He also didn't see big Duncan Ferguson, remember him? Big Scottish striker, as part of that either. This all came to a head in the big derby, Newcastle versus Sunderland. Gullit, feuding with these players, drops both of them. Shearer and Ferguson sit on the bench as Gullit goes into his first Tyne-Wear derby, Newcastle v Sunderland. It's kind of a real roll of the dice from Gullit, right? It's, okay, I'm going to prove that I don't need these players. Newcastle lose the derby. Oof. Ruud Gullit gets fired. Alan Shearer stays as Bobby Robson comes and takes over, scores a few more goals over a few more years.
I like that you've gone with the more like soccer philosophy approach to these rivalries versus me. I go with like the scandalous drama.
I've got some scandal as well. So yeah, Ruud Gullit, Alan Shearer. Apparently it was like kind of a long-running thing where they just clashed. Eventually, 2014 World Cup in Brazil, they kind of run into each other, I think at a party, because they were both there probably for the BBC, and they make up. I think Shearer introduced his wife, said, here's the guy that dropped me, which is kind of a laughable thing in Newcastle because he's Alan Shearer, Newcastle legend, you know what I'm saying? And Gullit essentially said, yeah, I'm sorry, I was young and I was arrogant and I was trying to prove a point and I got it wrong. So this went on for like 14 years then, but the feud was eventually settled and now they're kind of friendly.
Well, thank goodness Ruud Gullit learned his lesson and went and coached the LA Galaxy to supreme success.
This was
no mistakes
after that.
Then I'm going to go with a one that is staying in England, but it's really strange to me because it does seem like sometimes with these feuds there's like one big inciting incident that leads to a lot of drama down the road. But in this situation, it seems like it was a somewhat maybe innocent, maybe intentional, who knows, that spawned this crazy chasm, and it's Andy Cole and Teddy Sheringham.
I've got this one too. Okay, this is our first crossover.
So
I won't interrupt though.
Okay, well, no, please do if I get something wrong. But from what I understand, it basically starts with Andy Cole making his first appearance for the England national team. He's subbing on
1995
for Teddy Sheringham.
Yep.
Teddy Sheringham does not like give him that high five, give him that handshake that you usually get when you substitute out,
or the good luck on your debut kind of thing.
Yeah, and essentially it starts from there to the point where when they're playing with Manchester United, winning the treble, winning the Champions League, they did not speak while they played together. Did not speak in the locker room. They had Dwight York, the other striker in there, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer as well, but Dwight York was the intermediary. That like Andy Cole, if you wanted to convey something to Teddy Sheringham, would tell Dwight York, he would convey that to Teddy, and vice versa.
So do you have the quote?
No.
So Andy Cole wrote a column for the Independent newspaper where he explained this, right? So the England debut you mentioned is 1995. He says that, like, as he subs in, he was expecting the good luck. He didn't get one from him. Andy Cole says, "From that moment on, I knew Sheringham was not for me." 2 years later, 1997, Sheringham signs for Manchester United. They become teammates. Cole says, "We played together for years. We scored a lot of goals. I never spoke a single word to him."
There it is.
I wouldn't ever cast aspersions on Sheringham as a top-rate footballer for his clubs and country. I've just loathed him personally for 15 years.
Weird.
This does not have a happy ending.
No, it does not. They still don't seem to be on good terms, and it doesn't really make any sense aside from all I can figure is that Teddy Sheringham is kind of a jerk. That's what I'm going with. And it's weird to me because, as I've told you before, like growing up, I would watch like these little like 3-minute highlights of Manchester United, and Teddy Sheringham was always this like smiling, affable, like scoring a goal and celebrating and being charming. And so in my mind, it was like, oh, he's such a nice guy. But then there's other little stories that come out. The most recent one was in a charity game that he had like it should have been like a straight up red card challenge on Gordon Ramsay, Chef Gordon Ramsay, playing in like a celebrity pro-am or whatever it is, Soccerade, or I forget what it's called. But it really was. It was just like
probably comic relief.
It was like a ruthless, like scissor challenge that it definitely should have been a red card. And then he kind of like got in his face and teased him a little bit. And I think Gordon Ramsay sort of was like, okay, this is funny, I guess. But it was just very strange. It was very strange.
Gordon Ramsay's ligament nightmares.
And I also love Gordon Ramsay, I'm not going to lie. So in that moment, I was like, how dare you be mean to Andy Cole, but how dare you tackle Gordon Ramsay?
So here's the interesting part to me. I'm going to assume, from Sheringham's perspective, he's getting towards ish. I know he's still playing for England in '98, so he's not towards the end of his England career. But he sees this young up and comer Andy Cole,
I think that's probably it,
as a competitor for his spot with the England team. So I really just think it's that competitive streak type thing of not wishing him good luck, just trying to maybe intimidate him a little bit as he comes on.
But it's still weird, though, right?
It's weird. It's not good, but I'm saying I can understand why he's doing it. But I feel like afterwards maybe was the time Sheringham should have just been a bit more friendly, or Andy Cole should have asked him what was all that about. The problem to me is that this thing happened that is not a great thing, but could have been settled, right? If they'd just spoken to each other. But then it looks like they both dug their heels in and refused to talk to each other. And that's why they don't talk for 15 years.
If only there were some pop culture reference about a character continuously making rash decisions based on a prophecy that a younger person would come in and supplant them.
What?
I'm talking about Cersei Lannister here. But that's what it feels like, right? It's like you're sort of like taking it out on the wrong person, that maybe there's this young up-and-comer like challenging you for a starting spot. It's not that like they're very good or they're in the prime of their career.
Yeah.
It's just sort of like, no, this is a personal thing, and I'm going to make it even more personal by not shaking a hand. It seems odd.
Cole said he was a little bit shaken because he said like it's his debut, and everybody saw Sheringham not shake his hand, and he felt a little like weirded out afterwards, and it kind of affected how he played because he was thinking about it in front of all those people, in front of the crowd. But the most interesting thing to me about this feud is that it didn't seem to affect the on-field performance. Manchester United won league titles, won the Champions League. All of that stuff happened with Sheringham and Cole not talking to each other. Because as far as I can tell, they were perfectly happy to pass to each other, which is supremely professional.
Yeah, there are definitely other feuds that did not make my list where it was like the players refused to pass to each other. And like, so it almost works to people writing these sorts of articles' advantage, because now you have the photo of Sheringham and Andy Cole celebrating. But it definitely is. It is still weird because then you have that idea of like they didn't speak, and you look at the photo and it's like Andy Cole with his arms out and Teddy Sheringham kind of like hugging him from behind. But even then, Andy Cole looks a little bit like, "Why are you touching me, man? Like we don't like each other. Don't celebrate with me. Don't celebrate with me."
Okay, I've got a more modern one.
Sure.
A very, very current one.
Uh-oh.
Eni Aluko versus Mark Sampson.
Yeah.
So Eni Aluko is an England women's national team player, even though she hasn't played for a while. Mark Sampson was the England women's national team manager. He was fired today, or he quit today. I'm not quite sure exactly what the situation is.
How much of that do we think has to do with this situation versus like results or anything else?
They just won a World Cup qualifier 6-0.
Right.
So a lot.
He was supposed to win 7-0 though. That was the big problem.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
So essentially, if you've not been following this, Eni Aluko basically claims that there was a culture of bullying and harassment in the women's national team, the England women's national team. She said they were racist.
It was a lot of like stupid, overly familiar jokes that are just kind of straight up racist.
But yeah, exactly. Yeah, there were things like so Aluko's family is from Nigeria. Some of them were coming over to watch her play for England. Sampson apparently said, make sure they don't bring Ebola with them. Like really dumb things like that. But she also says that on the coaching staff there were like members of the coaching staff who would talk to her in a Jamaican accent, even though she's like of Nigerian heritage. Yeah. So that makes no sense.
And this is what I mean when I say like it's definitely like racist, but it's also like, but the person who's doing it, I feel like would say like, no, it's not racist. It's just like we're friends. But it's like you don't realize that there's that over familiarity of like, hey, Amon, like that's not funny. I don't think that's clever. You're kind of being a jerk / racist / more obscenities that I'm not going to say because we're a family friendly show.
And then Aluko apparently was given an £80,000 settlement by the FA to sort of hush about this. And there was some sort of internal reviews of Sampson's conduct that sort of passed him and said, no, it's all fine, but also here's 80,000 and Aluko to not ever talk about this, which implies guilt, right? Very much implies guilt. And then it's not all Aluko. There's another player, Drew Spence, who apparently, when Sampson was given a team talk about sort of aggressively pressing in midfield and maybe just picking up a yellow and that's okay because it's okay to sort of get cautioned or get a warning once, he said to Drew Spence, haven't you been arrested before? 4 times, isn't it? Drew Spence arrested 0 times, but the only black player in the room. So this is the kind of like, the word I think is insidious racism, right? Where it's kind of like, you maybe even don't know that you're doing something racist, but you're definitely doing it. And Aluko brings this to the attention of the FA.
Oh, man.
And the FA kind of rally around Sampson, at least until today. But this is definitely going to be a long-running feud. Yeah. And I think I know whose side I'm on.
I think the side that will look better in the course of history. Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, that's probably the way to go. Usually, social justice or social progress always tend to be like the better side to be on.
There you go.
Mm-hmm. I got there eventually.
There's mine.
Well, I'm going to keep it in England, and I'm going to keep it in Manchester, because I'm going to go with Bobby and Jack Charlton. Are you familiar with this one?
I can't believe I don't have this one. Yes. Oh, wow. Yes.
Yes. So it's basically... you would expect these two to be, thick as thieves. They're brothers. You have Bobby living through the Munich air disaster, so you'd expect them to sort of like have that really tight bond of having survived.
Won the World Cup together?
Yeah, won the World Cup together. Another thing that they survived. But really, apparently it was like frosty for decades and worse at times, because Bobby married Norma is his wife's name. His mother, Sissy, spelled with a C, hated Norma. Apparently, it was a huge falling out, and it was because of the wife that Jack thought he didn't like that Bobby had chosen an outsider over the family. There's some Sopranos vibes in here too. And so apparently, like Bobby Charlton
Northern Sopranos
didn't speak to his mother after this incident, even when she was on her deathbed. I believe he did not visit her, did not speak to her.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I knew that Jack Charlton's sort of reason for being very bitter was because of the way Bobby treated their mother.
Yeah, he didn't speak to her after 1992. She died in 1996. Ooh. So there you go. Yeah, so it was a family incident as opposed to on the field incident. But either way, you'd expect those two kind of men who went through so much and accomplished so much to be best of friends, and instead, icy silence.
And then the other thing is they played for Manchester United, obviously, Bobby Charlton. Jack Charlton played for Leeds. So there's definitely a bit of a rivalry going on there as well.
A little bit, yeah.
So Bobby and Jackie Charlton. All right, interesting. Before we move on, time for today's ad. Today's show is sponsored by Howler Magazine.
It is indeed.
For the third and final time this week, the discount code will get you 20% off a Howler Magazine subscription. If you go to fifa.wtf/gethowler, the link will be in the show notes. Use the code TSS and the number 2 for 20% off a subscription to Howler Magazine. It is, I promise, George promised, the best deal you can get on a Howler Magazine subscription. You look anywhere else, you will not find a better deal. That's why it only runs for 1 week. It has to end on Friday, so we don't put Howler out of business with discounted subscriptions.
That's the goal, right? We would prefer that an advertiser not go out of business because so many people take the offer.
I mean, I would put that on our resumes, though.
I mean, yeah, I guess.
Discount code's so successful, we buried probably the best soccer magazine in America.
I'm not sure that then helps us get more advertisers, but sure, why not, Daryl? Why not?
So George sent us... So we actually do... Genuinely, we subscribe to Howler Magazine. The new issue has not arrived yet, but George has sent us some PDFs.
Right.
Today's story that we want to quickly focus on is titled, and I love the title, United by Passion, parentheses, and fiduciary responsibility, in parentheses. And it's all about sort of fan-owned clubs and sort of the glory of that, but also some of the pitfalls of that. It's by Jean de Boer, or maybe Jan de Boer.
Yeah. Because and to your point about like the pitfalls, because you hear about like even like they used to support, like a big part of it is FC United of Manchester and how they used to be at Old Trafford every weekend, and you have crowds of 70,000 or 75,000 or 60 at the time, I guess, and now it's like crowds of 2,000. But that doesn't matter because we're fan owned and we don't have the Glazers telling us what to do.
Yeah.
But then at a certain point, you kind of wonder how long does that like anti-authority vibe last, and how long, if you do continue to have success and move up the ranks, do you then come into that conflict of like, well, now maybe we do need to have a little bit of outside investment.
Yeah, and
wait a minute, where do we go from here?
Certain teams have gone that way. You sort of have to... I think the essence of the story is you can be fueled by your hatred of the original group, like the Glazers, for example, with the United situation. But at some point, you have to make your own decisions and decide how big you want the team to be. And then you start having some internal rivalries once you don't have that outside thing to focus on. So to read the full story, subscribe to Howler Magazine. Once again, it's fifa.wtf/gethowler. And the discount code is what, Taylor? I forget. I've only said it 2 times already this week.
What is it, Daryl Grove?
It's TSS2. TSS2 for 20%.
I felt like you were stalling for a minute there. I was wondering if you had actually genuinely forgotten.
I hadn't. I was asking you to do it.
But just keep me on my toes.
You just bounced it straight back.
Sure did.
So TSS2 for 20% off. Thank you to George and thank you to Howler Magazine for sponsoring today's show. This is the beginnings of a feud.
Well, I'm just going to say, speaking of the discount code, though, I did enjoy, not only does Daryl Grove remember discount codes, he also does IT troubleshooting.
Do I?
Because I enjoyed the one person who on Twitter was like, I can't figure this out. And you're like, could it be that it says you need to enter an email address? And it was like, yep, that's it. So well done, Daryl. Solving problems. Well done, buddy.
We should add extra to the invoice for tech help.
I think probably should, yeah. Well, you should. Yeah, I won't take that away from you. That would start a feud.
I would say the reason I knew that is that when I always test out the codes when advertisers give us codes to make sure they actually work. When I tested this out, I did the exact same thing. I didn't put my email address in. I just put the discount code in, and it said, enter the email address.
There we go.
Remember? So I learn by doing. Learn by doing.
Learn by doing, indeed. But not by feuding. Daryl, have you got more feuds for us?
I do. Okay, this one feels weird to talk about because it's so US soccer-centric, but you can't not have...
I know where you're going with this.
Eric Wijnaldum versus John Harkes.
Yeah.
The feud that eventually led to John Harkes not being selected for the 1998 World Cup, despite being, in his words, and I believe in Steve Sampson's words, captain for life.
Right.
So we've kind of skirted around this a few times and sort of deliberately not said what happened, but it is all out in the open, right? It's all
Have we? I feel like we've had this all out of the open several times.
Oh, okay. Well, let's do it again.
Okay.
So as I understand it, the problem is that in the mid-90s, John Harkes had an affair with Eric Wijnaldum's wife. These were like two of the US's best possible players.
Yep.
This is a US team that had the success of 94 World Cup. They had the Copa America 95 when I think we made the semi-finals, and it was a really good sort of like team spirit, go-get-em sort of attitude from the team. We were all set to go to the 98 World Cup. And then this happened, and Steve Sampson, the coach, ultimately made the decision, I'm not going to take John Harkes because of what he did.
Right.
US massively underperforms at that 98 World Cup. And Steve Sampson, to his credit, sits on this information because it's private and personal until Eric Wijnaldum himself reveals it on Fox during one of those Fox Football phone-in shows. He talked about it, and no one had known. I guess people behind the scenes must have known. The public did not know. It's now public knowledge. I'm assuming that there was not much friendly conversation between Harkes and Wijnaldum after 98.
Well, that's my question though, because like I wouldn't disagree with you like including it on this list, but that is a key point that I feel like in this story it's usually Harkes did this and then Steve Sampson, Harkes, Steve Sampson. Like you don't hear Wijnaldum in there, and I can't tell if that's because he just decided to keep it out of the spotlight or he really didn't want to talk about it. But you don't hear much about the bad blood that I have to assume exists between him and Harkes, and I wonder if that's maybe just because he's decided I'm not going to address that in public. I'll keep that one private.
Well, like I mean, so we've spoken to Eric Wijnaldum a couple of times. I can't say that we know him very well, but I got a feel for sort of the type of guy he is. I really like him. Just to be sort of full disclosure on it, I kind of feel like he's one of those people that will compartmentalize something and just be like, all right, that's not helpful. Not dealing with that. That's that. Yeah. Because I also know I read a quote that he kind of said to Steve Sampson, if you want to include him in the 22, as it was at the time for the World Cup, just do it. He's one of the best 22 players. We'll figure it out. Yeah. But Steve Sampson was like, no, he's kind of like really crossed his teammates. Like Steve Sampson said, I would have considered not selecting him if he was doing this outside of the squad. But with another squad member's wife, I'm definitely not taking him to a World Cup.
And on a like unrelated but kind of related note, wasn't it Wijnaldum who like U.S. Soccer like didn't want to pay them, or there was a pay dispute, and basically they're like, well, we'll send like college players in your place.
This is the 95 Copa America. There was a dispute about how payments would be handled in terms of I think the newer players to the U.S. squad were going to get less and the older players would be guaranteed more, and they all said no, we want it to be shared equally. And Eric Wijnaldum was one of the leaders who was saying, well, we're not going to go if you're going to enforce this. They said we'll send college players to the Copa America, and Wijnaldum said he laughed and said good luck and hung the phone up.
Right. And like that mentality.
And the players got what they wanted. They bonded together.
Yeah. And I feel like that mentality right there tells me what I need to know, which is that I feel like he probably was like, yeah, okay, you're a terrible person and I'm done with you. That's it. Like, there doesn't really need to be a feud if I'm just never going to speak to you again. A feud implies like back and forth, and I'm just kind of done with you.
But I mean, to be very clear, we don't know like what their relationship is right now.
Yeah.
But you never see them hanging out or talking. Let's say that.
You've never seen them in the same place at the same time. Except for when they played together with the U.S. national team.
Exactly.
Other than that, yeah.
Who you got next?
I am going... So I've tried to keep it like relatively light because there are those stories out there about
I took us kind of deep there, right?
No, that's fine. Because even that, like, that's still like... I'm referring more so to like there's stories about like clubs and players playing in like former Yugoslavia before it broke up, other kind of war-torn countries that have had like players who had families killed, and that's a little too dark for what I'm going to go with.
I got you.
With that said, this one is dark as well.
All right,
just not quite to that level.
Prepare myself.
But it's Didier Zakora and Emre Belözoğlu, which is one
does
you...
this end with a really hard kick?
It sure does. You could... there's like a few different people on these lists that you could probably go with as like this player versus anyone, and it would work. Joey Barton is one of those, another gentleman who will come come up later, is one of those. And Emre Belözoğlu is one of those. He's had a lot of different run-ins with a lot of different players, frequently involving race, that he kind of doesn't make it a secret that he is a racist.
Didier Zokora is Ivorian. Yes,
he is indeed, but it was a problem for him at Newcastle. He had a lot of controversy there. It's been a problem for him in Turkey on multiple occasions, and in this situation, it was Didier Zokora playing for, I believe, Trabzonspor, Emre Belözoğlu playing for Fenerbahce at the time. Racially abused Didier Zokora. There's no dispute about that. He obviously said some pretty horrific things. I think got away with it. I think he didn't get really any discipline for it, and I think was kind of overly physical with Zokora as well. So in the follow-up game, you can see this. There are lots of clips. You can see Didier Zokora sort of having like a kick here or maybe an elbow there, and then at one point, it is just a full, as much as can be, kick to the groin from Didier Zokora to Emre Belözoğlu. And I feel like that kind of ends that feud right there because Didier Zokora won. But either way, that's a bad blood for like justifiable reasons if you're Didier Zokora. Taking it out in the, I have to assume, the most like happy of ways. And just like, yep, enjoy that. And I think he only gets a yellow card for it. So there you go.
All right.
That referee was like, okay, that was definitely a red card, but like I know what you did and it's Emre and he's terrible, so enjoy a yellow.
All right, next on my list. This one is a bit more civil than people kicking each other between the legs, but it still went on for a long time. It's Johan Cruyff versus Louis van Gaal. It is the most Dutch feud of all time, I'm going to say.
Yep.
Because it's all about philosophy,
Yep.
I think. So a lot of reasons why sort of they say that they don't mix. Like Johan Cruyff literally says, I think we just have a bad chemistry. Meaning, do you know people like this where you don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with them, but you just don't
it just doesn't
connect in some way, right? But the problem here is they are two of the most influential figures.
His name is Daryl Grove.
In Dutch. Wow, this show must be awkward for you. Two of the most influential figures in Dutch coaching history, and they have two very different styles. Like Johan Cruyff is all about sort of individual expression. I know there's more to it than that, and like total football and all that, but he's very much about individual expression. Louis van Gaal, as you'll know from watching them for 2 seasons, maybe more. Maybe, it felt like 100 years, right?
It did.
As a Manchester United fan,
it sure did.
He's very much about sort of a rigorous, almost military discipline, like here's your role, just do your role kind of style. And this has been a battle for the soul of not just Dutch football, but specifically Ajax Football Club, which is where they both came through.
Like the one that we always go to, but I think there's a reason why we always go to it is when Van Gaal was coaching Manchester and had the rule that like you had to take 2 touches in the box. Like you couldn't shoot one time, you had to take a touch and then shoot. Can you imagine Johan Cruyff ever, number one, being told that and how well that would go over? Or number two, as a coach telling his players, like, no, there must be more touches in this specific area at this specific time in order for this specific result to occur. Probably not going to happen.
Exactly, yeah. So that's kind of the roots of all this. It's also that Van Gaal is younger than Johan Cruyff. When Cruyff was sort of bossing that Ajax team, I think in his second spell there.
I have another one, sorry, but I feel like this is a better analogy. Do you remember in Parks and Recreation when Ron Swanson and Chris Pratt, Andy Dwyer are both assigned to coach the youth basketball team?
Yes, I do.
And Ron Swanson's are like, he's teaching them all the pyramid of greatness and they have to work on like bounce passes and they're all wearing high and tight, and then Andy Dwyer's is just chaos, and they're like, that's what I picture. It's sort of like Louis van Gaal, everyone must do the exact same thing, everyone must be silent and listen, and Johan Cruyff is just like smoking off in the distance while his kids just run around and do whatever. That's what I'm saying is the difference there.
So this all goes back to when Van Gaal was an up-and-coming player.
Right.
Cruyff was like the boss, like literally the player who bossed the Ajax team, and people talked about Van Gaal as the player who would eventually replace Cruyff. So that thing was like already happening during their playing days. Turns out Van Gaal was not as good of a player as everybody expected. As part of Van Gaal's story is that he didn't quite hit the heights that people thought he would hit as a player, but then he goes into coaching and is very successful with this sort of very regimented style. So there are like moments where in the future where, so I think it's about 2000, Cruyff has this whole blueprint that he wants the Dutch FA to follow, and his sort of protege, Frank Rijkaard, Barcelona coach,
I've heard of him,
is all in on sort of, getting the Dutch FA to adopt this like Cruyff blueprint of how we should work, how it all should be done. And I think Rijkaard gets fired. They bring in Van Gaal's blueprint. It's the other blueprint. Same thing happens at Ajax. This is the big famous one. In 2011 at Ajax, they decide to bring back Van Gaal as a general director of Ajax Football Club. Cruyff, as sort of a legendary figure, is on the board of commissioners who get a say. The board organised the vote for when Cruyff was out of town and sort of reinstalled Van Gaal against Cruyff's wishes. And I think they clashed over that as well. I think Cruyff even tried to sue Ajax for going over his head and sort of trying to trying to get Van Gaal back in the picture against his wishes. So it's this
long-running,
long-running, very Dutch, philosophical feud about football.
Man, all right then.
Yeah,
and then
it makes me love the Dutch even more though, because I love
Really?
the way they argue about football things in this very deep philosophical way. Like they seem to take it more seriously, almost like it's some deep thing that has to be.
No, you're absolutely right because it's like some of these like I don't like your wife, you're having an affair, like John Terry Wayne Bridge having an affair. And then this one is like you want to play aggressive attacking soccer, and I wish to play a disciplined one. Like this will not stand.
I say 2 touches in the box.
Yeah, exactly.
I say do a weird turn.
Oh, man, that's good stuff. Well, my final feud, this is the player I alluded to earlier who you could list a number of different people that he's had a feud with. You could go with Alf Inge Holland. You could go with Sir Alex Ferguson. You could go with Mick McCarthy. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to go
feud machine.
Roy Keane and Patrick Vieira.
Oh,
that
that's
feud, which I guess has been resolved because they appeared on like Frenemies or whatever it was, or like Rivalries, where they kind of broke down their long-standing rivalry. But it relates to Roy Keane captaining Manchester United, Patrick Vieira captaining Arsenal, basically kind of like being in the same area of the field on a consistent basis. Led to a lot of run-ins. The most famous one was the how's your Irish accent?
Not good.
All right, I'll do it my best. And it was like the I'll see you out there. Like that one, that's more Scottish, isn't it? It's always Scottish. It's always Scottish with me. But you know what I'm talking about. It's in the locker room when like Gary Neville, he felt like was getting abused by Arsenal players. So Roy Keane comes through and does a lot of screaming and yelling and pointing, and then it bleeds out onto the field. So just the sort of like how good both players were, what they meant for their team, and then how much they seem to genuinely dislike each other. All of that makes for a very exciting feud.
The reason I like that feud is it is a feud, but it does have a level of respect for almost recognizing a similar spirited person, recognizing a kindred spirit in terms of how you can influence a game, how like really over the top competitive you are, and sort of the lengths you're willing to go to. So it's almost like they measured themselves by measuring each other, right? And they just pushed each other onto greater things in terms of midfield competitiveness and driving your team forward.
Yeah, to the extent I'm not
resolve into mutual respect in the end in that frenemies thing.
Yeah. So I just feel like it's not even on like the top 5 rivalry or feuds list for Roy Keane. I feel like number 1 with a bullet is probably Sir Alex Ferguson at this point, because he's gone from like speaking of him lovingly in his autobiography to in his like newest autobiography. I think he only, or like in most interviews now, he only calls him like the man or that man. He doesn't call him his name. Things have fallen out. Things have fallen out there.
So I thought about including Roy Keane versus Alf Inge Haaland.
Yeah.
And I started doing some reading about it because it went from like the original tackle was 97 when Keane tries to tackle Inge Haaland, gets injured. Inge Haaland stands over him and sort of like suggests that maybe
Roy Keane dove or whatever.
Yeah, that you're not that injured.
Yeah.
Then the revenge tackle comes in 2001. So I assumed that there's this long running rivalry.
No, that's it.
I think Alf Inge Haaland just didn't really know anything about it until
Roy Keane is just a psychopath.
Yeah.
That's it. Like he held on to that one and was like, I will not forget this slight.
Right.
And I will have my vengeance.
So what I'm thinking, it's not really a feud if one side doesn't know about it.
No, it's like hunting. No, it's really not.
It's like saying you have a feud with a deer.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And in that situation, Alf Inge Haaland was definitely the deer.
Yeah. Also, it's worth, just while we're on this, that it's worth saying that tackle didn't necessarily end Alf Inge Haaland's career. Alf Inge Haaland finished that game and then played another game for, I believe, Norway later on, and it was his other knee. It was his other knee that sort of caused him to retire, and he was almost there anyway.
It is funny, though, on an unrelated note.
The history will be written that Roy Keane finished his career. The history will be incorrect.
It's the same way the United States won the Olympics by beating the USSR in the Olympic final. No, they did not. They beat them in the semifinal.
Oh, really?
Yep,
Yeah,
but everybody believes. You kind of
yeah.
But I will say, like, it is funny though, because when I first started writing for The Offside, which is how we met.
Oh yeah,
or like
it's not how
we met, but it's what brought us closer together.
Okay.
Like I remember I wrote a thing about like the greatest moments in Roy Keane's career, and I listed that one because I thought it was kind of hilarious at the time. And watching it again, I was like, no, you are a madman. Like you tried to end someone's career. If someone did that to me, I'd lose my mind. So not great from Roy Keane is I guess what I'm going with there.
Oh, and then the Mick McCarthy one is big too, right?
Yeah.
Because that was like Keane literally left a World Cup because he was just like, I'm not playing for you. I'm not being involved with this Irish Football Association.
Yeah, he's got some feuds. He's got some feuds. I think he and Niall Quinn don't get along anymore. I think he doesn't get along with most of the Republic of Ireland team that he played with, not the one that he coaches. So, yeah, I don't know. Roy Keane's interesting. Okay,
so we're on this topic. I've got another Louis van Gaal one.
Oh, boy.
So he also has, or had, or probably still has, a long-running feud with Ronald Koeman. Did you know this?
Right, yes. I know this only because in the research it's always like describing the one that you mentioned, the Cruyff-Van Gaal feud. It's also like at a dinner with Ronald Koeman, who he also hated. Like it's usually something like that.
So the genesis of the Koeman-Van Gaal thing is in 2004-ish, I believe, Ronald Koeman was Ajax head coach, right? Louis van Gaal was technical director. So the idea is Koeman coaches the team, Van Gaal does the transfers. But over the course of a season or two, Van Gaal essentially gets more and more involved and like has favourites in the team. Apparently he comes to practice, watches, and like applauds when the players he likes and thinks should be playing do things in their practice. And just like starts telling
that
Koeman...
might be favouritism.
Yeah, but starts telling Koeman how to coach and what the tactics should be, getting more and more involved. And then the biggest thing is he sells Zlatan Ibrahimovic at the very end of transfer deadline day without really telling Ronald Koeman what's happening and not giving him any time to get a replacement. And can you imagine how good Zlatan is for Ajax at that point when Juventus are ready to spend big money on him?
Somewhat.
Yeah.
Man, that was a controversial time period because I believe that's when the Zlatan Ibrahimovic, Rafael van der Vaart feud started when they were both at Ajax at that time. And then I think I think that's the one where they played each other at the international level and van der Vaart alleged that Ibrahimovic intentionally injured him because of like
I didn't know this one.
Issues going back to Ajax. Yeah, I think they still don't like each other. So yeah, that's kind of a common one with Zlatan as well. He's got more than a few out there that he does not get along with.
Have you got any others to mention?
I mean, like if you read articles like the players that hate each other, if you Google that, one of the ones that always comes up is Zlatan and Oguchi Onyewu. But for me, that was more
it's a one-off incident.
They got into a fist fight and basically just don't like each other now. But I wouldn't say that's like a feud.
Yeah, this is different, right?
Yeah.
You have like flash incidents, like spark incidents, and they happen and then they're over. That's not a feud. A feud is like Betty Davis, Joan Crawford. It's got to have some length to it.
But I mean, I would say the other two that I thought about including were Romario and Edmundo, who basically, when playing together, at one point would not pass to each other while playing for the same team on the same field. That's not going to go well.
There was also a thing where I think Edmundo was included in a World Cup squad over Romario. Romario owns a bar, and he, I believe, had a cartoon drawn that was very unflattering to Edmundo and hung it in the toilets in the bar. So there's a lot of like feuding over who would be the sort of star striker when they played for. I did the research at Flamengo and Vasco da Gama. It was a lot of like they were kind of effective together, but in a Neymar Cavani type of way, they both wanted to be the main guy, and it never ever worked out.
It did not. I think Romario also had a feud with Bebeto, but that's more like political than it is on the field.
They're both senators now.
Yes, and I believe
Romario also had a feud with Luis Felipe Scolari.
Wow,
because Scolari would not select him for the 2002 World Cup squad. Man. So he feuded about that as well. Romario, a lot of feuds.
Yep. And then the other one that comes up a lot, but I didn't really include just because it just seems sort of like, they just didn't like each other, was Oliver Kahn and Jens Lehmann.
Yeah.
That it was basically, again, it related to playing time that Oliver Kahn was like kind of the ever-present goalkeeper for Germany up until 2006 when he gets replaced by Jens Lehmann. Oliver Kahn not thrilled about that, not thrilled about the manager who did that replacing, Mr. Jurgen Klinsmann. To the extent that I think he then like made fun of Jens Lehmann when he continued to play for Arsenal when he was 41 and got replaced by Almunia. But again, that's just sort of like competition over a spot leads to two players kind of having a rivalry that's like a tiny bit friendly, but mostly disliking each other. But there's not really that like powder keg incident that makes it that captivating for me.
What about, you mentioned Jurgen Klinsmann.
Yep.
What about Jurgen Klinsmann, Landon Donovan?
That's an interesting
Is there
one.
the essence of a rivalry or a feud there? I feel like they've both been kind of quiet about it, but ever since Donovan was left off of that 2014 World Cup squad, you know that he's not been thrilled about Klinsmann and vice versa, and they've never really said particularly pleasant things about each other. I think they've both kept quiet, but I bet that's bubbling away beneath the surface.
I would go so far as to say, which Klinsmann are you referring to? Because you could say Jurgen, you could say Jonathan Klinsmann with that tweet.
Jonathan was like, I don't know, 15, 16 at the time, so Landon Donovan is too mature to have a rivalry with a teenager. I think it's very much the guy that left him off the World Cup squad he's going to be more upset with.
Yeah, and that was, I feel like that was the like welcome to adulthood moment for Jonathan Klinsmann, where it was like, oh no, like suddenly I'm getting a lot of ats and they are not friendly.
I feel like he should kind of get a pass on that.
Yeah, I don't think he gets a pass, but I think they've made amends, and I think he apologized, and so it's better there. But I absolutely think that Landon Donovan is probably not a very big fan of Jurgen Klinsmann, and I doubt now that Jurgen Klinsmann is the head coach, I doubt they're talking very often.
So I'm basing a lot of this...
He's not the head coach, excuse me.
Yeah. I know what you meant. Yeah. I'm basing a lot of this on the kind of send-off game that Donovan got after the World Cup, I believe.
Yep.
And there was a weird sort of like... handshake, congratulations, hug that you do with the coach when you come off one of those games. And the body language was so cold.
Yep.
The temperature dropped like 50 degrees Fahrenheit in that general area during that exchange. It was very much the opposite of like the Alex Ferguson, Cristiano Ronaldo hug after Euro 2016.
Yep. Speaking of Chris, did you just say Cristiano Ronaldo? You did, right? Okay, just making sure. I mean, that was another one that came up pretty often was the Cristiano Ronaldo Wayne Rooney incident from Euro 2006.
Yeah, but that was buried
not
pretty
Euro
fast.
2006, but yeah.
It was the 2006 World Cup with the wink and all that. That was buried pretty fast because they had to play together the next season. That was a tabloid-encouraged feud for a month. Then it was okay when they got back to play.
And that's the big thing, is that a lot of this stuff you hear about, like the Dutch squad, I think there was much made of the fact that like
Euro 96.
There were like the racial divide, where I think there was one photo of them all having lunch together, and it was like all the white players and all the black players sat together, and then it became this whole story about how there was this like racial feud in the locker room, and I guess there was to some extent that it was like players from Suriname or had the like Suriname background kind of rallied together.
I think there wasn't necessarily a division in the squad based on those ones. I really think there was like some like Suriname inspired food at one table, so they all went for that kind of thing. As opposed to two like cliques in the dressing room.
Yep.
The disagreements were deeper than that and about different things. I think I can't say this for sure because I haven't researched it. In typical Dutch football fashion, it was about the philosophy of how the team should be playing.
Yeah, but you do have these moments a lot of times where it's like the media wants something to be a feud.
Yep.
So like the most recent one was, I think it was Juan Mata, where like they made it out like, oh, Jose Mourinho and Juan Mata didn't hug, and it was like, no, they did hug. You just didn't show them hugging. But like, so you do have ones where like you want it to be an interesting story, and then you have the other ones that are just like beautiful for tabloid drama. The most obvious one there would be John Terry and Wayne Bridge.
Yeah, of course. Rio Ferdinand, John Terry as well. After John Terry racially insulted Anton Ferdinand.
Ashley Cole up in there too.
That definitely happened.
Yep.
That definitely happened. I've got one more that's kind of interesting. I want to call Cristiano Ronaldo and Leo Messi a low boil, very much simmering feud where they're both too smart to actually say anything offensive about the other person, but they're definitely trying to outdo each other, and I think they definitely don't like each other, but they're keeping it quiet.
All of those things are accurate. Yeah, because you never really hear like them like have that just open like animosity towards each other. It's like, oh, he didn't deserve that.
Messi never says he has too many stepovers. Nothing like that.
Like you'll definitely hear like, oh, Messi wasn't pleased that Ronaldo won the Ballon d'Or. Messi didn't think that Ronaldo deserved it, and vice versa. But you definitely don't hear them like doing interviews and saying like, he's not that good. Oh, he's just short. Like you kind of have it all. Like it's there obvious on the field that they don't like each other, and they very much enjoy looking better than the other one when they go head to head. But you definitely still don't have that inciting incident that makes it into an open and obvious feud.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like almost like a Vieira Keane thing, but without the like, if you like Senegal so much, why don't you play for them moment. You know what I'm saying? But they're kind of pushing each other on to greatness, but they're not having a direct confrontation.
Oh boy.
So, final thing, it's kind of a bit of news I want to address here that I'm thinking is kind of a feud. NASL, current edition, versus US soccer.
Yep.
So if you heard my interview with Wes Bodine a couple of weeks ago, US soccer denied the NASL, their Division 2 sanctioning for next season. NASL's response was to sue US soccer for antitrust and sort of basically question whether US soccer has the authority to govern club soccer in the United States.
Yeah. Controversial approach there.
And the antitrust version of it is that essentially US soccer works with Soccer United Marketing. Major League Soccer works with Soccer United Marketing to promote MLS and US soccer separately. And that the overlap between those two things essentially proves that US soccer favors MLS and makes it harder for anyone else to sort of to even approach their standard, and therefore they're stacking the deck against NASL. It's going to be a lawsuit. I don't know what's going to happen, but this is going to be a rivalry.
So do you expect NASL and US Soccer to have a handshake anytime soon, or is it going to be more like lack of handshakes leads to further division?
I think they'll be exchanging legal documents for a little while now. Well,
I think that's probably pretty accurate.
As this story develops, we'll dive into it more on the Total Soccer Show.
His plan.
All right, what else we got coming up, Taylor, on TSS?
What do we have coming up?
We have US Open Cup. I think US Open Cup is tonight. It is New York Red Bulls sporting KC. It's a big deal because New York Red Bulls have never won what people would call a trophy or a title. They've won the Supporters Shield, but they don't have an MLS Cup or a US Open Cup. It's their first chance to get that. I want to watch because Tyler Adams.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's definitely a good reason to want to watch.
Assuming the game's good, on tomorrow's show we'll do a quick review of that game. Thanks Ira Jersey for encouraging us to do so. But yeah, we want to watch that anyway. US Open Cup final. final. Maybe get a look at Weston McKennie's first start for Schalke against Bayern. We kind of watched it out the corner of our eye yesterday, but maybe we'll watch it a bit closer.
Maybe.
I saw him run into a referee. I don't know if you...
That was ridiculous. Daryl, listeners, Daryl did not look at the screen for the first 2 minutes, looked up and saw him run into the referee, who I would say the referee equally responsible for that situation. And then Daryl immediately declared, nervy start, not sure what to make of this.
I mean, so we'll rewatch and make sure, well, not make sure, I don't want to confirm my bias. We'll rewatch and see what actually happened on McKennie's debut for Schalke against Bayern. Other news, Josh Sargent has officially signed with Werder Bremen, or at least Werder Bremen have announced that he will sign when he turns 18 next year. So that is nailed down. Maybe we'll talk a bit more about that.
I want to clarify really quickly because I'm not sure you understand why I find this Weston McKennie thing so funny. It's not because you were being like ridiculous or anything like that. It's because I feel like you feel so strongly about Weston McKennie that it's almost like he is your child. And when he falls down, you're like, oh no, is he okay? Is he going to be all right? Is this his fault? Is he nervous? What can I do? Should I fly there? Should I talk to him? Should I calm him down? What can I bring him? Like, does he need a care package? Like, it's just, you have that level of dedication to certain American youth players that it just makes me very happy.
I'm just saying we should slash the tyres on Yarmolenko's car so he can't get to Dortmund games.
And then sign it like done by WM, and then we've got a new feud to talk about.
Yeah, there
Perfect.
we go. So yeah, all of that will be on, what day is it today? Wednesday? All of that will be on Thursday's Total
It's been that
Soccer
kind of week,
Show.
hasn't it?
If you want more TSS, you should definitely go listen to today's Top Draw Soccer Show, which will be published by the time you hear this. It is, so Travis Clark recently became a father for the second time. He wasn't around. So Taylor and I talked about the Player Development Initiatives. This is US Soccer's initiatives for youth soccer, which as of August 1st are mandatory. Every youth soccer club is using these. We get deep into it. If you care about the future, go subscribe to Top Draw Soccer Show, all one word, Top Draw Soccer. Take a listen to that. Finally, there's going to be a bit of politics after the music on today's TSS. You are welcome not to listen. If you're one of those people who think we should just stick to sports, completely understood. Don't listen after the music. You have been warned.
And I just want to add, I am not going to be here when Daryl delivers those remarks because I have to get to a coaching engagement. But I will say whatever Daryl says, I agree with, unless it's about me and something negative. Then I don't agree. Outside of that, I fully endorse whatever Daryl says.
Okay. On that note, Taylor Rockwell, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today and not feuding with me at all.
Right back at you, buddy. And feud over is what I'll say.
All right.
And I don't know what to think.
Handshake?
Yeah, why not?
Listeners,
we shook hands. You couldn't hear it.
Listeners, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow. Okay, Taylor has left the building. It is just me. I've got something really important I want to tell you about, something I want to ask you to do. If you're not interested, I fully understand. I'm going to leave 5 seconds so you don't have to hear it if you don't want to. Okay, if you're still here, the thing I want to talk about is the Cassidy-Graham healthcare bill in the Senate right now. This thing is dangerous. It's dangerous to low-income people. It's dangerous to anyone who might exceed a lifetime limit that could be imposed on your insurance. And it's particularly dangerous to me and people like me. That's people with pre-existing conditions. If you've listened to the show before, you'll know that I have type 1 diabetes. I can get affordable insurance because of the protections that are in the Affordable Care Act. These past few years have been the happiest and healthiest of my life. It's the years that we've been able to really invest time into the Total Soccer Show and make it grow. And it's all because of the Affordable Care Act. It means I don't have to worry about my insurance or take shortcuts with my health. The Cassidy-Graham bill allows those protections to be waived. It is a direct threat to my health and my well-being. And please don't think this is just me running my mouth about something I don't know anything about. Since moving to the United States in 2005, the thing I've paid the closest attention to, with the possible exception of the US men's national team and the career arc of Christian Pulisic, is healthcare policy in the United States, because I have a vested interest. So I want to be real clear that I am well read on this. I have followed this for 12 years. I'm really confident that I know what I'm talking about, and I'm confident when I say that this bill is a disaster. It is dangerous to me and to many other people. So here's what I'm asking you to do. If you live in a state with a Republican senator, please contact that senator, call them, ask them to vote no on this bill. Put as much pressure as you can on a Republican senator to vote no on this bill. If you don't live in a state with a Republican senator, maybe think about, do you know anyone who lives in a state with a Republican senator? Call them up, ask them to call their senator. You can also go to a website, TrumpCare10, 10 is spelled out, TEN.org. It will give you tools to call your senator and to call other people in other states who may be willing to call their senator. The other thing you can do, Jimmy Kimmel had a really good monologue to open his show the other night. I think that's the best chance of sort of getting the word into the mainstream so that this bill can't sneak under the table before September 30th. Please share the YouTube clip of Jimmy Kimmel's monologue. He does a really, really good job of explaining all the problems. Let people know that this thing is real, this thing is a threat, this thing is dangerous to people like me and many other people around the United States. Okay, thank you for indulging me. Thank you in advance to anyone who takes action as a result of this. Please put pressure on your senators. Please help kill this bill. Okay, thank you again. I promise the next time you hear the Total Soccer Show, it'll be all soccer, no politics.